Hello, 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 and welcome to the first episode of Nothing Zilch Nada, the only podcast show as of right now that I'm aware of, where you have two hosts that have absolutely no clue what the topic's going to be about until we get there. So joining me today is the wonderful host, Mr. Jacob Green, standing at 5'11", if I remember correctly, and then weighing 120 pounds. He is a master of
50.
saxophone. What's that?
It's 150.
150. Ah, you must have gained weight. He is a master of playing the saxophone, and for all of you single ladies out there, he's single as well.
So,
And then you have me, one of the biggest nerds you'll ever meet, who isn't Kevin Smith or Eminem, because apparently Eminem's a really big nerd in a good way. I don't want to be in his next diss track. I'm Mr. Xavier Dean, which reminds me, I need to change my name on this.
change your name to the D machine. That's what everyone called you in high school.
I can't do that. If I announce myself as one thing, I can't just say the other thing. Besides, if I'm the Dean machine, that makes you the Green machine.
Actually, not true. All of my colleagues in my undergrad and even a couple of professors would call me Dr. Green. I don't have a
Doc
PhD
Green.
yet. Yeah. Even my the rock band that I'm in, that's also my stage name too. So
Nice. I would totally watch a band where the stage name for someone is Doc Green.
yeah.
All right. So before we continue on, I'm just going to point out a couple things about this podcast. Our main reason for having this podcast is to keep a really good relationship between the two of us. We've been best friends since 7th grade, 6th grade?
Yep, 7th grade. It's
7th grade.
been
Yep.
a decade now.
Yeah. We've been friends for so long that at this point, if something bad were to happen to one of us, odds are we're gonna hunt the other person. I think we've already signed the contracts for that one.
Yeah, signed the contract with death.
Yep. Signed the contract with death.
Death's knocking on the door right now.
Oh man, I hope not. I have 2 doors in this room. So, like I said, the main reason for us to start this podcast is keep going with our conversations, but we're also using this as a way to promote healthy conversations because, we live in a society where we've got so many arguments, so many debates,
So
and
much negativity in the
so
world.
much negativity, and there's a lot of people who will ruin relationships, ruin friendships over something as small as should pineapple be on pizza. Which, by the way, I say it should. You may fight me on that if you want, but I believe that pineapple should be on pizza.
My mom will agree with you on that, just saying that.
Well, then your mom is awesome, Jake.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so like I said, we're just promoting healthy conversations. We're promoting, in some cases, agreeing to disagree. We're not trying to ruin a friendship. We're trying to strengthen our friendship by providing more information on the knowledge that we have on given subjects. And I feel like knowing multiple sides to an argument is one of the biggest ways for us to fully see the world as it is.
Yeah. Pretty much it.
Hmm. And then, because we spend a couple months preparing this, we do also have a set of rules that we are going to be following for this. First rule: anything that's not allowed at the Thanksgiving dinner table, we will not say. If that makes any sense. So basic
Yeah.
So basically, we're going to try to keep religious talk and political talk to a minimum. And if we do mention either of those things, we're going to keep it more as a neutral, not necessarily because we don't agree with all the things that we say, not necessarily because we want to anger people, but more the opposite. We don't necessarily want to anger people. And, because, again, this world is full of, the whole opinionated views where you know, someone hears something and it's immediately you're wrong instead of let's agree to disagree. I feel like it is better if we try to keep everything
Yeah.
as neutral as possible.
Yeah, and other social media platforms and even other podcasts deal with those types of topics as well. So if you want
Mhm.
discussions based around those, then go follow those other podcasts, you know.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. We're not trying to steal you from any of the other podcasts. Believe us. We're just trying to give you another source of media to listen to in the background while you're, cleaning things around the house or if you're doing things in the bedroom. Uh, that's the other big thing. So we're going to try to keep the language as PG-13 as possible, if that makes sense. Basically, what was that?
But basically our podcast is every Marvel movie.
Yes, that is actually a really good point. So basically, what we're going to do, we're going to, because we are young adults, we are having conversations as if we were in the same room together. You're just, listening in. There is going to be some cursing, there's going to be some suggestive language, but it's not going to be like descriptive or anything. Like, I'm not going to describe what's going to happen. And the language I say, or that we say, because we're both saying things, it's not going to be strictly, you know, you know, cursing. It's we may slip, one ass a couple times, couple shits, maybe a damn, but that's basically the limit. We're gonna keep anything that could be used as a derogatory to a minimum, or well, I try to keep it as nothing, but stuff happens. We're having a good conversation. I will, however, specify we will not be saying the F word just because there's bound to be people who are gonna, come in who will listen to this and they won't necessarily agree with that word. And since I'm going into teaching, I don't want it to be where, a parent comes in to listen to this podcast and hear me say that word and immediately think, oh, this person should not be a teacher.
Yeah, I'm also technically going into teaching too, as well as performing. I mean, musicians in general are not the most how do I put this? Um, some of them have dirty language, and I've seen it all, but a lot of them do keep like a very professional level in terms of their language. So
Mhm.
I'm also on that same camp too,
Right.
And plus I got six nieces and nephews, so
Mhm. Yeah. So he's got a bunch of little ones that he is at times tasked to watch over. And if they happen to watch this, we don't want them to gain any bad behaviors. Uh,
leading by example. That's how that
yes,
works.
leading by
As best of
example.
an example as you can.
Right. And like I said, we're going to say these words. We're going to try to keep it as few as possible. We're not going to use them as derogatories towards anybody or anything, but these types of things might slip. and we're addressing this as humans. All right. Was there another thing that we wanted to focus on rules wise before we actually get started?
I would say probably one other thing. This kind of goes hand in hand with like, the topics that we ourselves talk about, in terms of language and content. That also goes for anybody that wants to pitch in with like discussion points, because we are allowing our viewers and subscribers to like chime in and, help us with like certain topics to talk about, but we won't
Mhm.
talk about them if it's not appropriate.
Right,
Um,
exactly. It We're gonna do this thing, you know, as time goes on, where we're gonna be, asking you guys for conversations to at least start our episodes with, just to, get a little bit of a fresh take, something that we don't normally talk about, something we don't normally think about, but we're wanting to keep it, again, nothing political or nothing so political that it's going to drastically tear, the world apart. Nothing overly religious. And again, we're going to try to keep subjective language uh, to a minimum. So if something comes up pertaining to those things, you know, we're probably not going to use them in this podcast. Probably. It's still really young. Things might happen.
our podcast is going to destroy the world.
Yes. Yep. So this is how the world dies. Not with a bang, but with a simple conversation between two friends. uh, yep. So, with that in mind, we've got some time. Jake, how do we want to start this entire thing off? How do we want to show that we're ready to podcast?
Well, I say the first thing that we should do is maybe give ourselves some more exposition. I mean, we've kind of gave ourselves some small details to back off of already, but maybe just like a short bio,
Okay,
so
short
that way the
bio.
audience gets to know more about us a little bit.
Cool. Would you like to start us off? Just because I'm trying to gather what information I want to put into here that I can.
Yeah. So, yes. So as Xavier just said, my name is Jacob Green, although some people also call me Jake because sometimes there's another Jacob in the room as me. So you
Mhm.
want to call me by my shorthand name, that is completely fine with me. Um, let's see. But me and Xavier grew up in the same town together. And we met each other in grade school.
Mhm. Yep.
And both of us did band together. And band was just one of those things, and I'm sure Xavier can attest to this too. But for me, my parents forced me to do it, just like
Oh no, my parents didn't force me into that. I wanted to be in band.
Oh wow, wow,
Yeah.
complete opposites there.
Yeah, complete opposites. I wanted to be in band. I actually wanted so like I mentioned earlier, Jake plays saxophone and he is really, really good at it. He actually is the one who made our intro that was earlier in the show, which, by the way, great job on the intro song. He's also going to be making the outro, which is going to be at the end of the show. So, but he played saxophone the entire time, and when we met, I was playing baritone. But before I wanted to play baritone, I actually wanted to play flute.
That's interesting. That's interesting because when I started out in band, I wanted to play the drums because um maybe just to give more context. So I'm the youngest of three other siblings. I have two older sisters and a brother. Both of my sisters are married and they have kids, and my brother is currently getting his master's degree in psychology right now. But he was in band too, and he played the drums, and I thought he was like really good at it. I still think he was really good at it, but um, I wanted to play drums too. But my mom was like, no. She didn't want another loud drummer in the house. But my second option, I wanted to do flute. Um, because I
Nice.
thought it was a cool sounding instrument. My mom also said no to that. I don't remember the reason why. Um,
Mm.
but I remember, they had us try out the instruments, and I tried out, I remember it was trombone, trumpet, and saxophone. And, you know, you hear about other saxophone players and their stories about like how they got into the instruments. Like, oh yeah, I heard this one cool dude like play this really killer solo and it's great. Or um
Mhm.
I think they just sounded awesome. That was not my case. I just thought it was a weird looking instrument and thought it sounded funny. That's not the reason why I play now, but
Right.
yeah, my mentality was different back then. And my parents, uh, they homeschooled me up until I graduated high school, um, and they also forced me into like other activities, all of which have benefited me, believe it or not. Because I
Mhm.
did Taekwondo, I got up to like a second degree black belt for that, and then my mom got me into running, and probably another thing that this is another thing that Xavier and I do a lot.
Mhm.
Apart from band, we're also like avid runners, um,
Yep.
and we'll run in races together sometime.
Mhm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
but I was in like other activities, um, and because of certain events in high school, I wanted to be a musician. And my parents thought that I wouldn't make it as a musician, for further down the line. But the more they heard me play, we have faith in you that you got this, and we'll support you.
Right.
So I got private lessons during high school.
Mhm.
I got private lessons during high school, and
Right.
because of that, I was able to get into my first college for undergrad in music performance for saxophone, and that has eventually lead me to here. So I got my bachelor's degree last semester, and I'm currently in grad school in
Mhm.
University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign right now, and it's been a blast. It's weird to look back at how all this started, but I love music, but I still like to run. I still work out and exercise. Um, I make time for friends and family. Um, I like to game whenever I can.
Mhm.
Um, you know, but yeah, that's just some context about me. Uh, if you didn't know already, and if you want to know more, maybe in future episodes we'll talk about it. If you just like pick at my brain a little bit.
Right. Oh, I'm sure we're gonna continue talking about our backgrounds throughout the episodes. Which, by the way, sorry about the noise on my end. Both my father and my brother are home. I may or may not be recording in my front porch, uh, which is hilariously the most quiet part in the house. No. So I guess it's my turn for bios. So like Jake mentioned, he and I met uh seventh grade in band, and like I was mentioning earlier, the first instrument I wanted to play was the flute. I thought it was a pretty instrument. The problem was I couldn't play a single note on the flute. So,
I can attest to that. So, besides saxophone, I also know how to play flute and clarinet, and
mhm,
flute is an easy instrument to get into after you get past the fact that the embouchure is just a really tough thing to do.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Like I said, I couldn't play a single note. I think I've tried maybe 10, 11 times. And the band director was like, "Okay, let's try the trumpet," which sort of a similar thing. Couldn't really get a sound out of a trumpet mouthpiece until my seventh try, and was it was a horrible sound. But I was able to get the sound, so then he's like, "Okay, how about the baritone?" And for those of you who don't know, baritone is basically small tuba. So basically, I get a higher pitch sound for a tuba without all the extra weight on it. No. So I've played that for 8 years. Played it from fourth grade all the way through my junior year. And then for my senior year, I ended up switching to trombone, which I still play trombone more on my free time now than, or nowadays. Besides that, like Jake mentioned, I run. I was on my high school's cross country team from freshman to, or from my freshman year to my senior year, to a point, and I ran to a specific point where I ended up running 500 miles over the span of a summer twice. The team had a specific thing for, and like as an initiative to run over the summer, try to get 500 miles. Like I said, I got it both my junior and senior year, which were the first 2 years they uh did that. Which, by the way, is a little more ironic that I wore the shirt. I was actually just at one of the cross country meets earlier today for my sister, who's also in cross country and band. Yeah, she plays the clarinet. We all know the shtick about clarinets.
I know the shtick. I play it.
Yeah.
There was a joke in my undergrad that the clarinet was the stick of unemployment, which I don't think that is entirely true, considering the fact that like both classical and jazz musicians play clarinet, and it's a
Right.
fairly popular instrument in those genres.
Right. No, but like I said, I ran, or I started running shortly after Jake and I became friends. Jake was not the reason why I started running, though I would like to say that he is probably one of the reasons I still run, because during the early COVID days where things were shut down, I wasn't really running that much, and whenever Jake was in town, he would say, "Hey, you want to meet up, go for a run, and just talk a bit?" So, Jake, thank you for keeping me somewhat in shape during that time.
I did not know about that. I mean, I knew that we ran like during at points during COVID, but I didn't know about that.
So the
Um,
main reason for that was just because I was dealing with a lot of school stuff as well as work. At the time, I was working maybe 5 days a week. Uh, yeah, 5 days a week at nights, and then I would be doing stuff for school in the mornings. Uh, but yeah, it got to a point where there wasn't really a good time for me to go out for a run regularly. I still ran every so often, and I'm still trying to find times to go out and run. But like I said, just right now with how busy everything is, it's more on a down low. But I still help out with the cross country team whenever I can. And I do coach over the summers. Summers are the times where I'm more able to go out, go for a run. Yeah. Besides running and band, I have one brother and one sister, both of whom I mentioned earlier. I am a special education major. I'm on my student teaching semester right now, and I'm expected to graduate in December, um, I disc golf. I think that's a key thing I need to mention.
Yeah, both you and my brother kind of influenced me to do a little bit more disc golfing.
Right.
I haven't done much of it since then, although of course I don't. If anyone, so I don't know if any subscribers from the Urbana-Champaign area would be watching, but if there's anyone that knows of any good places to disc golf, please let me know because that would be very useful.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. And once you find out, please let me know so that one of these days I can visit you and then we can go out to that course. Yeah, but I go out to disc golf a couple times a week. I help out with a couple leagues. Well, right now I'm helping out with one league on Friday nights at our home course. And it's I got so much into disc golf that I'm actually a certified rules official for the next 3 years. I took this little test over the rule book and spent $30, and it again left me certified for 3 years. So if I wanted to arrange a tournament or sanction a league, I can go and do that. Um,
Nice.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I work at Subway. I feel like I mean, that's pretty much the only other thing that's left. Over the summers, or the past couple of summers, Jake and I would work at our hometown for the city in the public works department, which is part of the reason why we started or why we decided to have this podcast because we had a couple of coworkers of ours who would hear our conversations and they're like, how can you talk about anything? And then it went more to, you should start a podcast where you're just talking. So that's kind of what we're doing here. We're just talking.
Just like every other podcast that talks, but
Yes, but every other podcast tends to have some sort of theme,
yeah.
whether it's, like distractible, where they talk about, like, they still have that, randomized, we pick a topic, but it's more one topic, and they have it more in like the style of a game show type thing where
Mhm.
the people get points. It could be like this podcast series called Can You Don't, where they take uh for lack of a better term, the dumb parts of the internet and just talk about them. I know there's a bunch of other podcasts that will be two different people just talking about their lives, but overall, they each have you know, that main topic. We will not have that topic. So we could talk, today we could talk about sandwiches, and then next week we will move on to movies. The week after that, we could start talking about which car brand uses the most gas. And then the following week could be about how realistic unicorns actually are.
Yeah, but the possibilities are limitless.
Yes, they
They're
are
even
pretty
more
limitless.
they're even more limitless if you chime in too.
Yes,
You know,
please.
and
Because,
anything helps. I mean, um, it can be something ridiculous.
yes,
It can be anything. We really don't care.
honestly, the more ridiculous, the better. Because then
It
we
leads
can
to
get
more
into a
interesting discussions that way.
Oh, definitely more interesting discussions. We can get into a good flow. We can make up our own facts if it's something as ridiculous as who do you think would win in a fight, a taco or a grilled cheese sandwich, which may or may not be one of the topics for one of the next episodes. But for now, I think it's about time we transition to our first topic. Jake, what do you think?
Well, you mentioned Subway, um,
Mhm.
but I do want to mention something, this just came up to my mind today. So I was out grocery shopping as I
Right.
do like every other week, my weekly commute to like Aldi's and Walmart. And I was in Walmart and
Mhm.
I was in the sauce aisle and I was gonna get hot sauce, and I use it for like tacos and eggs and whatnot. Um,
Oh, don't tell me you were talking about the Subway sauces in the aisles.
that was exactly what I was gonna talk about,
Every
but not
time I'm at a store with my sister or my father, they point it out to me.
I was gonna have a build up to this where it's just like I saw the most horrific thing I ever seen, and it was garlic aioli sauce
You want to
from
what? I'm gonna be
Subway.
honest. The garlic aioli sauce is actually pretty good.
It is pretty good. I'm
It is
not gonna
pretty.
but uh but but besides that, it did make me think about because you know it may seem like a big deal that like oh Subway is bringing their sauces. Every other company, every fast food company has been doing this for
Yeah.
like how many years now? Because like I would think it I would think that like I started noticing it around 3 or 4 years ago, but it's
Mhm.
probably way earlier than
Oh,
that. It-
definitely. I
yeah,
know
because
Olive Garden used to sell their or would sell their dressing. I I think the earliest I remember 8 years ago, maybe nine.
yeah, but let's see. I was looking up um some things that you would find on the supermarket. But the first thing that came to my mind, because like Basket Robbins, has their ice cream in
Right.
like the frozen aisles. That's probably like a no-brainer right there.
Hmm.
Um and then Starbucks has like their coffees in the aisle. Now I did look into websites of like what fast food type products were in the grocery stores, but there was one thing that I did see once. This was like probably a couple years ago or something, also in
Right.
a Walmart. Um, and Um, this was coffee that was in a similar bottle shape to like the Starbucks drinks that you would get, except it wasn't Starbucks. In fact,
Hmm.
it's a product that you would never guess would be a drink, and
What?
it was Hostess.
Really?
Yes, I'm not kidding you. I haven't seen in the websites I checked it out yet, but I know I saw it there, and like I took a good look at it. It's just like who would want to drink this? Like,
You would be surprised. We are in America.
yeah, well, yeah, that's fair. But then again, with how health conscious some Americans are sometimes, and
Hmm.
like I know like Hostess and uh the other sponge cake product
Right.
brand name, I can't remember it right off the
Little
top of my head.
Debbie's? Is it Little Debbie's?
Uh maybe. But either way, like that stuff
Hmm.
uh, I don't want to say it isn't popular anymore because you still find that stuff at the grocery stores, but like it's definitely not as present as it used to be, you
Right.
know. At least from what I've seen. And like you probably had a similar experience to this where it's like, you go over to someone's house, like a friend of yours house, and the parents like they give you a tree and it's like the Hostess,
Hmm.
the ding dongs, the sponge cases,
Right.
not cases, cakes and
Hmm.
whatnot. Um, but you were just a kid back then. We were kids back then when we had those, but it's just like
Hmm.
nowadays that stuff is just not that appealing when you're an adult now.
No. Well, I
And
think part of it is just because we ate so much of that as kids that at
yeah,
this point it's not something that we are excited for anymore. We
yeah,
all can think of the taste of a Twinkie or a Ding Dong or any of those things, and it's
yeah,
at this point just doesn't sound as appealing as something we haven't tried or something we've tried once every, say, couple months. Yeah.
yeah. And besides that, you got all these. I think it's now more noticeable with like the different sauces from different companies because besides Subway, there was Arby's and Chick-fil-A.
Hmm.
Is pretty common. Now here's the thing. I don't mind Chick-fil-A. I'm not a big avid fast food eater, especially
Right.
now since I mostly cook for myself now since
Hmm.
I'm living in an apartment, which has been great. But even when I went to Chick-fil-A and people are just like, "Oh, the Chick-fil-A sauce is just like, the best thing out there." It's just like I think it's just all right.
Right.
I think Chick-fil-A sauce it's all right. It's just
Well,
kind of overhyped, you
yeah.
know.
Oh,
Like,
easily. It's that McDonald's special Big Mac sauce, just the things like that. And then for someone like me who doesn't really like most sauces on their meals, I'm I'm more likely to just eat it the way it is rather than getting sauces. So hearing people say, "Oh, this sauce is like the best sauce," it's, no, no, I completely disagree.
yeah. Also, I didn't know you were not that big a fan of sauces on
No,
your
I'm
stuff.
not. If you've ever noticed any of the sandwiches that I bring into work, you'll notice that none of them have any sauces. And if they
Well,
do,
it's
so if they
kind
do have a sauce, it is because it is something that has been or that has been messed up, and instead of wasting it, I just decided to put it in as my free 6-inch from my store.
yeah. It's kind of hard to tell though,
It is very hard to tell, especially
Yeah,
considering I like to put cheese more on the side so that it kind of cakes over, the meats and the veggies. So,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, but I guess that's probably a good segue into like um another thing that you particularly mentioned, but like
mhm.
Subway. So
Right.
Xavier currently works at Subway, but
Hmm.
I also used to work at Subway. It's
Yes.
probably like been 7 years ago. Well, it's
It
been
has
four
not
years
been
since
7 years ago. Or maybe it
four
has. I
four
know you
years since
left, huh?
4 years since I left,
Yeah,
but I
4 years
started
since you
working there.
left.
Yeah, I
And the only
started
reason I
working.
know, oh, sorry.
No, go
So,
ahead.
the only reason I know it's 4 years since you left is because you left shortly after I started.
Yeah, yeah, of course. But for my case, I started around like 2017. This was like
Mhm.
after our freshman year of high school, and I recently just got my driver's license, and
Right.
I
Hey,
recently.
hey, Jake, is there a chance you could hold that thought? We have less than a minute left in this. So let's use this as a good way to segue into our next segment. All right?
All right.
All right. See you in a bit. All right, we're back. All right. So where do we leave off on that conversation?
Um, well, I was just talking about like my start at Subway.
Oh,
So
right. Yes. Your start at
yeah,
Subway. So I
yeah,
think you left off with you had just gotten your driver's license.
yeah. So I got my driver's license. I was looking for a job, and um, I applied to other different jobs during my freshman year, or close to the end of it. But I got into Subway, and my cousin foster cousin was a manager there at the time, and our family knew her very well.
Mhm.
Um, and I had my interview with her, and she was like, "Great, you're hired." Um, and that's how it all started for me, you know. And uh, the summer before my sophomore year was a very interesting one because on top of working for Subway, I was training for my first black belt. So I was doing training, and then by that point, I was also taking saxophone lessons because I was becoming more serious about music and just trying to further develop my playing. Um, so there was a lot of things going on. It was a very interesting time. Um, but yeah, Subway for my first job, it was a pretty good work experience for the most part. Of course, when it comes to fast food and retail jobs, or I guess any type of job for that matter, there are
Mhm.
some downsides to it, at least when I was there. I went through like four managers, right, through the course of when I was there.
Mm.
Um,
Right.
yeah, so let's see. Because like my foster cousin was the first manager, and she left to take on a different job. And
Mhm.
then let's see, and then there was a different person.
All right. So I
Um,
I do want to add one more thing. Sorry for interrupting again.
yeah.
I'm gonna try to keep interrupting to a minimum, but I do also want to add we're gonna try to keep names more anonymous as well.
Oh yeah, that was probably the other thing. I wasn't gonna mention a name, but
I know you weren't. I just wanted to bring this up just in case.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
unless the person has specifically spoken with us about using their name.
Mhm.
So right
Yeah.
now, the only names we're gonna use are Xavier, which is my name, and then Jacob, which is the name that he has for some reason come up with. Because whose last name would actually be Green?
Tell that to my ancestors.
And I was making a joke, Jake.
Yeah, I know.
All right. No,
Um,
like I said, I just wanted to mention that because we forgot to mention that earlier. But so,
yeah.
continue with management.
Yeah, so as I said, I went through like four managers.
Mhm.
My foster cousin left for a different job, and then I went through one person for a few months, and then another person who stayed on for a while, um, and then another person which I can't remember if you were there by then. Actually,
Uh,
no. I went through five because
mm,
the assistant manager ended up becoming the manager.
mm,
And that was also when you got in. Um,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, I remember hearing stories both from you and from my girlfriend who also works at Subway. Or,
Yeah, yeah, that was the other thing.
mhm,
I Xavier's girlfriend, she came in the Subway um before he did, so I had some work experience with her, and
mhm,
she's a pretty cool person to work with. Um,
yes.
yeah, but I think some of the most interesting things to come out of that experience was the work stories. Um,
Oh.
this kind of reminds me about when I first started Subway, and my sister was like, "Hey, the odd ones out?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, "Well, he made videos about Subway, and he calls them Subway." It's like, and I remember watching them just be like, "Man, I can relate to this guy."
Of
Yeah,
course you mentioned the hot ones out.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I mean,
Go
at
go
this point, it
go.
seems like par for the course. If you're going to start some sort of internet thing, you have to work at a Subway first. Because
Yeah.
Odd Ones Out
I
did it. And hilariously, Margot Robbie, who's Harley Quinn and Barbie, she started out as a Subway employee.
Yeah, well, honestly, like some of the most some of the most wealthiest and successful people out there, they started out with day jobs.
Yes.
Like, you know, you find these people and they own like these big companies and big investors and whatnot, and then you find out that they start out at a McDonald's.
Yeah.
You got to start out somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
no matter how small it gets. Um, but on the advent of, you know, us working at Subway, um, and I mean, Xavier still works at Subway.
Yeah, and right now I have to like pick and choose what I'm gonna say with this just because I'm still working there. I know there's bound to be things that I should not say publicly just because I'm still working there. Nothing bad, nothing bad. It's just more based off of, the job itself, that I don't want to end up getting sued by Subway because I said the wrong thing.
Yeah. Well, some of my work stories, were they some of them came from I was working with a different owner, um
Hmm.
because the current owner that's there now, I've only had him for like I think it was a couple of years. Um so but some of the stories I am gonna say, you know, these are just work stories from employees, and some of them are just kind of funny. So I guess the first thing that story that came to my mind was early on, uh, when I was working at Subway during the summer, and I remember it was one of my first like weekend shifts, and it was a morning shift,
Hmm.
and our back then we changed this, and I think Subway has since got back into this. Xavier, you can attest to this, but we used to weigh the meats.
Yes, we are
Um,
now back to weighing meats.
yeah. So we used to weigh the meats at the beginning. Later on, when I was employed over there, um, we just portioned out the sizes and whatnot. Um, but in the beginning, we weighed the meats, and uh, we had this like small scale that we were using. Well, on that particular day, the scale wasn't working. So of course we had to portion out our sizes with the scoop, which you
Mhm.
would think people would be more understanding of that. It would not make a big deal about it. Well, guy comes in, asks for like a steak and cheese sandwich, and as I am portioning out uh the sizes of the steak and I put it onto the sandwich before I have it toasted, he's like, "Oh, aren't you going to weigh the meat?" And then I start explaining, "Well, you see, sir, our scale isn't working today." Took right off the door.
Mhm.
Not a word. That dude must have really wanted to weigh down his meat.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but yeah, there are just people like that that are just so particular with that
Mhm.
type of stuff.
So the interesting thing about the whole weighing the meat, we don't weigh the meat in front of customers anymore, but we weigh it or like pre-weigh it and put it in these boats, which is in theory supposed to be more presentable towards the customer. It's also supposed to help with portion control so that Subway's not putting too little or too much steak onto someone's sandwich. It
Yeah.
does add a full half hour to prep because steak is one of the higher ticket items. So we have to
Mhm.
have 3 cambros of steak prepped before we get started with the day. So like I said, it gives an additional 30 minutes to our work. So yeah, yeah. Do you have any other work stories before we get to me and my attempt at trying to do work stories?
Yeah, sure. What are your work stories?
I was so hoping you were gonna say, yeah, sure. So here's another one. So I've been working at Subway since COVID hit. Uh, and there was like a 3 month overlap where I was working and Jake was working. I think we only worked two shifts together.
Which is so odd. I wish we worked more shifts together, but
Me,
I think
mm,
Public Works made up for that.
oh, Public Works definitely made up for that. And went from only working two shifts at a sandwich shop to basically being paired up just about every day to mow different lots and public
Yeah.
parks.
Yeah.
You know, like
Well,
like I said, I started back in 2020, shortly after COVID. In fact, I got hired the week everything shut down. And because I had been hired around that time, I still had to do the online training. It took me a little while to complete it because around that time so there were a lot of schools during that time who had or that had decided we're not gonna do anything for the first month of COVID because we're not gonna be away from school for too long. This is just gonna blow over. Our school didn't do that. The high school kept giving us assignments. They're like, okay, well, yeah, this is gonna blow over, but we still want you to do some work. You're still taking up school time. We want your seniors to graduate when we're expected to graduate. We want everyone to finish school when we are projected to finish school. Although I think part of that was also at the time we may or may not have had too many snow days over the winter. I think.
maybe. I don't remember.
Yeah, it was it was 4 to 5 years ago. It was too long ago. But anyway, so I started in June under uh the last manager Jake had, and they were the manager from when I started to about 2021, maybe a little into 2022. And that was when management started having or started shifting almost as much as Hogwarts Defense Against the Dark Arts teachers have been swapping. I think right now I have had six managers.
Really?
Yeah, so there was Jake Slass, who was my first, and then there was this one person who was a great worker when I started, and I'm sure Jake can attest. Uh,
Yeah,
and Jake knows who this person is. I've
yeah,
discussed it with him.
I think I know who you're talking about. Didn't we have an insane discussion about it once? I
Yes,
can't remember. Okay.
we had,
Okay.
and it was because so many things happened within their first week of management.
A lot of things.
So many things happened. I have trauma because of that week.
I remember you talking to me about it, and I was
Hmm.
just like, glad I'm not there, and I'm
Yep.
doing public works.
Right. Yeah. Unfortunately, because of that, I still had like another year and a half of you trying to convince me to come to public works to get started.
Mhm.
I don't even think I had a good reason not to do it. I think it was just more because I was also helping out with the junior high band. I figured my days were already going to be pretty set in stone.
Mhm.
But anyway, so then it was her, and then I took a small break to start on my schooling at ISU for special education because I started at IV or IVCC, a community college, got my associates, and then transferred. I I'm financially responsible enough to know that community college allows you a better chance of getting more money towards other things. But anyway, so I did that, and then when I came back, there was another person, or they had another person in management who, by the way, is right now the current manager. But so they had just become manager when I or when I had come back to work because I realized I couldn't make my next payment without working.
Mhm.
And what ended up happening was they were going to go to school for beauty or like cosmet I think it's cosmetology
Um,
because I think cosmology is the study of the stars. Or maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe.
let me check that real quick.
All right. Well, while you're
Um,
checking that, I'm gonna continue on. So they stopped, and then there was this one guy who became manager for, I want to say, 4 months, maybe 5 months after that. He he kind of brought us into this sort of technological advancement where now we have like a digital sheet for counting counting our inventory. And yeah, he did a lot of things. He happened to be hired shortly after I was, and then after that we had a high schooler who, I think, out of all of the managers, was probably the most, out of all of the managers, they were the one that I didn't have, or that I had the least amount of problems with store wise. Because each of the managers, there was at least one thing I had a problem with. It wasn't a big problem for any of them. It was more of like a small thing. I mentioned it to them, and everything got fixed. But this manager was the only one I didn't necessarily have a problem with. But because she was in school, I tried doing everything I could to make sure that managing Subway wasn't her big thing that she was focusing on. And then she recently left, and now it's back to the one manager who left for cosmetology or cosmology, whichever one. Which did you find out which one it was?
yeah, so cosmology is like the studies of the cosmos in
Okay, so it
in
is
one line.
cosmetology.
Cosmetology is
Okay.
like beauty school.
Okay, cool. Cool. See, I know what I'm talking about. I'm
Yeah.
not always certain what I'm talking about, but I know what I'm talking about. Totally know what I'm talking about. But anyway, so yeah, so I guess that's five, but it's like a five with a Grover Cleveland type situation. Since Grover Cleveland was at this time the only president who had non-consecutive shifts or non-consecutive uh terms as president. No, but I've been at Subway for a little over 4 years now, and right now I am the scheduling manager, which is a newer position now, so that the overall management positions get split up a little more evenly. So that's the general gist of my timeline. I'm trying to think of some of the uh I'm trying to think of things I can say because again, I'm still working there, so I don't want anything that I say to negatively affect what's going on. I will say there was one time a couple years ago, I was working a morning shift We were currently training someone new who currently still works there. It was us two, the high school manager, and then one other person who no longer works with us. We were working the morning shift. I was on the register. Trainee was on veggies. High school manager was on meats, and then the person who's no longer there, they were doing counts. We had this rush outside the door, and this lady comes in. Well, okay, first there was a guy with one arm and his two kids that came in. The one arm's not necessarily important, but it gives a description of him that I'm going to use. So one armed guy. So one armed guy and his kids comes in. They start ordering their sandwiches, and then this lady comes in to order her sandwich. Now, again, I'm on register. I'm trying to make sure everyone's getting their sandwiches rung up correctly. So as I'm, going back and forth from customer to customer, I'm like, okay, you ordered this sandwich, and this sandwich, right? So guy with one arm comes through. He had two sandwiches, both of them for his kids. I ring him up, send him on his way, and then the lady comes up. Now she was ordering a BMT sandwich, which has salami, pepperoni, and ham on it. So I had that rung up, and I'm like, okay, the BMT. Anything else for today, ma'am? And then she's out of the blue says, "Oh well, you gave my sandwich away, so I mean," I'm like, uh, you know, I'm shocked about this because it's like I'm keeping track of everyone's sandwiches. This isn't something that's happening, right? But so you know, and she and I are going back and forth. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. What was the sandwich you ordered? And I'm trying to be reasonable. I'm trying to think of how to approach this, and she's just sitting here like, oh well, it doesn't matter. You gave my sandwich away. You gave the sandwich to one armed guy and his children. So I'm not, you know, and it wasn't like she was looking for a resolution or anything. Like I offered to try to remake the sandwich. I pointed out that her sandwich was still on the veggie side. Nothing was happening. She was just complaining that I gave away her sandwich. And from what I was told by the high school manager, everyone behind the Bane where we keep the food had a different reaction. So we had the trainee who was just scared for his life because he messed up or he thought he messed up and he didn't know if he was going to be fired. He didn't know what was going to happen. The high school manager who was on meats, she was getting worried because this lady was basically arguing with me about her sandwich. And the lady or the coworker who's not there anymore, had the angry face on her. Like she used to wear a mask all the time, so you can't really tell. Like you can't tell anything from on here, but you could tell from her eyes. She was ready to do something regrettable. And then apparently, from what I'm being told, I had that normal customer service, smile. Again, I'm just trying to reason with the lady. The guy with one arm comes back in, and he's like, "Hey, I don't think you gave me the right sandwich." And then this lady's like, "Yeah, see, you gave away my sandwich. You gave away my sandwich." So, like a reasonable person, because I like to double check things, because now there's a random BMT on the veggie side that no one has accounted for. I put on a pair of gloves, I open the sandwich, and I look into it. The sandwich that the guy had was turkey, ham, and bacon. And I pointed this out to the lady, and she's like, "Oh." So she goes back to the veggies. Her veggies get put into her sandwich. I'm going and remaking the guy with one arm sandwich. And like I said, because I don't like wasting food, I just put the mismade sandwich as my free 6 inch. And then like I said, I kept that one. I gave him the new sandwich and, rung both of them up. They're, on their way. Rush is done. I go to the back. And then the high school manager walks up to me and she's like, "You need to deal with more problems in this store." Well, because
Yeah,
that's
well, the thing about that, little does she know, you do deal with like most of the stuff.
well, nowadays I deal with a lot of things. A lot of my coworkers will send me messages to help them with things they don't know how to do or with problems that might happen in the store, and I try to, talk to them as soon as possible, through it. But again, because I'm currently student teaching, I'm in a school for 8 hours within the day. I can't just drop everything I'm doing to make my way to the store. I can't stop a lesson just to answer a question. So a lot of that has to wait until I'm done, and usually by that time, there's a new set of people who are working their shift. So I have to walk it through them as well as try to find out what happened.
Yeah, yeah. That reminds me of like when I was at Subway, and like even though I never was like a manager or assistant manager, I wasn't even a key holder. Um, but
You never held a
like
key?
uh I think I did have the key. I think they just gave up on like the whole key holder position and like gave everybody keys. But because
Okay.
yeah, but um yeah, but I remember that like when I was at Subway, I was usually like having to like solve certain problems with the store.
Hmm.
Yeah, actually, there is one story that just came up to my mind. Again, no names here,
Right.
uh, but she doesn't even like work here anymore. But um, she was working on a shift with me. This was hindsight 2020, and during midpoint of the summer, I think, and she was having a rough time during her shift because of like recent events that happened. Um, and these dudes who she knew and they knew her come into the door, and like
Oh,
she didn't
wait.
want to.
Is this the one where you and I were working with the person?
Might be. I
I think it might be because if I remember correctly, she had walked to the back and had mentioned to us that these guys were, she didn't want to talk to the guys. They were trouble.
yeah.
And she had asked me if I could cover the rest of her shift because she didn't feel comfortable,
Mhm.
working the rest of it.
Yeah. Well, if you came in to cover, she was still around,
Well,
and she was just
it wasn't that I came in to cover. I think I was supposed to work like a 4 to 8, maybe 4 to 9 shift, and I just covered the rest of her shift.
oh, okay. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah. Anyways, though, um, yeah, so these dudes come in and they were now I can't remember exactly how the conversation went, but they were asking like, where she was at and if she was like working around here, and I was like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. I was just playing dumb for them,
Hmm.
and I was like, do you want to order a sandwich and whatnot? And they were jerks. They were just like
They,
goofing off. And
they
like
were,
I
if I
wasn't
remember correctly, only one of them ordered a sandwich, and they were sitting in the store for an hour just waiting.
Yeah, but well, here's what happened, because I don't know if you remember this, but I told them to get out,
Hmm.
or I was gonna call them called the owner, not the manager, the owner, and they thought I wasn't. They thought I was kidding. I wasn't because I grabbed my phone and I started calling the owner, and then they were
Mm-hmm.
just like, "Okay, okay, okay, we leave, jeez,"
Mm-hmm.
and then they left. I think that was one of the few times I
So
actually stood up to something like that. It was
so the thing about that wasn't it they didn't fully leave. They were in the parking lot still
yeah,
because they had
that's
recognized our coworker's car. That was the main reason why they were still sitting in the store. It was because they saw that the coworker's car was there. So what ended up happening was after we closed, I think this is what happened, but we ended up walking her to her car, got into our cars, and we followed her to a certain point before noticing that they had left. So,
yeah.
yeah.
I can't believe you remember more of that stuff than I did, you know.
I have a weird memory.
I didn't even remember that you were there. That was
So the only reason I remember that I was there was because I remember this situation clearly. It was like that one moment where I'm like, oh my God, my friend is a badass. Like I said, we will drop some curse words, but like I said, not used as derogatories. All right, so it looks like our time for this conversation is about up. So, you ready to move on to the next one, or do we have any final topics pertaining to Subway?
no, let's
No.
move on.
All right, we're going to move on to a conversation that honestly was somewhat requested by a couple coworkers of ours. So, we'll be back with that now. All right, and we're back with our last topic of the day. And this one, like I mentioned, was actually requested before we had anything released for our podcast by a couple of our coworkers. So a little bit of background on this. Again, we had a bunch of coworkers tell us that we should make a podcast about the things we talk about. And these are coworkers from the city of Streator, our public works. And our last day, I don't know what you were doing, but I was sitting waiting for the time to end because, you know, it was the last 10, 15 minutes. And I overhear them having this conversation. I happen to chip in with my thoughts, and they are sitting here like, hey, you're planning on starting that podcast still, right? Don't tell Jake about this conversation because we want to hear his immediate reaction to this.
Oh no. Oh no.
Relax. Like I said, this is still PG-13. This is still something that we it's not necessarily subjective or anything. It's not going to use foul language. Not that I'm aware of. But it's again, it is something that they feel that you would have a really good time thinking about, especially considering you and I tend to talk about these things all the time at work.
Depends on what you mean by having a good time with it.
So,
Like,
well, because this is something that could pick your brain, that's what I mean by that. So the
okay,
conversation starts with a question, which which of these sounds more crazy? Talking your way through something verbally or talking your way through something in your head?
which one is more crazy?
Well, which one's seen as more crazy? And the way they brought it up, one of them, and I again for anonymity purposes and not just because I forgot who was on which side, one of them had it where while they were working, they were talking to themselves whenever they were doing stuff as a way to talk through the situation. Like just an additional way of thinking, whereas the other person will just do it in their head. So verbal thinking versus internal thinking, mental thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, which one sounds crazier? Which one, like if someone were to do it more, which one would you be? Oh, I didn't know you would do that. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense, but geez, like
So I guess maybe the first thing I should ask, which one are you? When you're thinking through a problem, are you talking through it or are you like thinking in your head?
I don't know. I kind of see myself doing both sometimes.
Okay.
No. Like I guess it just kind of depends on the situation.
All right. I mean, that makes
I
sense.
I guess like, since I'm living on my own, I guess I do a little bit more of talking myself through problems, but I also I also still try to think stuff out in my head.
Right.
Which is something that both of which I still constantly do, both
Mhm.
as a musician and just in any other situation that I'm in.
All right.
In terms of what would be seen as more crazy, though, I'm not, because
And
like there are different.
I'm just gonna note when we were saying crazy, we're not meaning like drastically. We're meaning more just not a lot of people will see it the same way.
Yeah,
That's what I mean.
yeah, um, yeah. I'm not sure because the different people. I see different people, and like some of them, like they think internally, although you wouldn't know that unless they told you or you could recognize that.
All right. Well, I mean,
Um,
you can see when people are thinking through things in their head.
yeah, yeah, and I get those moments too. Um, but you also had the people that will like talk out problems for for themselves.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. I'm kind of stumped on this one because I think
You're
it's just kind of I think it's just kind of like a preference thing.
okay. Well, I mean, that's fair. I mean, I know a
And,
lot of people prefer one thing over the other. I know for
Mhm,
me, I am more of a verbal thinker. Like I'll do both. And
mhm,
like you mentioned, it will depend on the situations. Like if I'm in my classroom, I'm trying to think through everything in my head so I'm not disrupting the class. But
mhm.
I feel a lot better if I'm talking through a problem because
Yeah.
then, you know, I'm talking and then I'm hearing myself talk through it and I'm picking up additional parts of the problem that I may not be able to fully think about.
Mhm.
So then it will start putting things together and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this problem has a simple solution. It's also why whenever someone comes up to me with a problem, I I restate their problem. It's less because I didn't hear them, and it's less because I just restating it. It is more because when I'm restating it, I'm going through the problem in multiple different points. I'm going through it by hearing it again, and I'm going through it by verbally saying it as a way to, for lack of a better term, as a way to understand the problem more.
Yeah. I think my dad is more of a verbal thinker too, because like yeah. So for those who don't know, my dad is a financial planner. He's also a I guess I would call him a farmer as well, even though um he doesn't take care of like any crops, but or animals for that matter, except for rabbits. But
Wascally wabbits.
I'll work with him sometimes, and like he'll verbally work out problems, uh or not necessarily problems sometimes, but just trying to come up with like solutions, you know. And it's all like a step-by-step process. It's like, you know, just reading through like an instruction manual. Only
Exactly.
it's only it's just with your brain.
Exactly.
Just this stuff coming out thin air. My mom, I think, is also a remote thinker too, a little bit.
hmm I
Probably not as
know.
much.
What was that?
I was gonna say probably not as much as my dad. You know,
Okay.
I don't see my mom doing it as much as my dad does.
Right. So I know I've had a similar conversation to this with my father. He is also a verbal thinker. He does a lot of work. He's an HVAC technician, so he does a lot of work with his hands. He has to do a lot of work with fixing air conditioners and heaters. And he's mentioned to me several times that he will talk to himself through the problem as a way to find a solution because it gives another medium. And I think that's part of the reason why I will talk my way through a problem
Mhm.
because, it makes sense. If you have a problem where it's like say for example, I'm trying to think of I'm trying to think of the best one. Let's say changing a tire. Let's say you're driving and then your tire pops. And, because you're driving, you're on the road, it's a high tense situation. When you're talking your way through it, it sort of relaxes you and it lets you think about things in parts. So it's like, okay, I've got a flat. I now need to go to the side of the road. Okay, now that I'm on the side of the road and I'm parked, which tire is it? Is it one on the outside, one on the inside? And then again, you just talk your way through it. It's sort of relaxing, and that's how he describes it. It's more of a relaxing type thing in a high tense situation.
Yeah,
I can't tell you whether or not my mom's a mental thinker or a verbal thinker. I can see her more as a mental thinker,
yeah.
but I can't tell you for certain.
Yeah, I think you're more, I don't know if this is the case for you or other people, but like I see more myself as a mental thinker when I'm just like analyzing something. Like you're taking like a math or science test or something. And
Mhm.
you know, because most of your tests are in a room with other people and because you don't want to like disturb anyone. I mean, I guess if you could silently like whisper out your
Right.
your solution. But I think for most people in that situation, you just do it all in here.
Right.
Um,
Well, and for me, when I was doing tests, I would mouth out the questions just so that it's silent, but I'm still going through the motion of saying it. Doesn't work as well because it works just the same as trying to think the question through. It's just if someone were to look at you, they would think that you're trying to make those fish faces. The
yeah, I was gonna say they would like it'd be like silently talking in class
Mhm.
and someone would communicate with you and they're like, you want to pull the underwear off of this guy? Like just like, you know, it's like, oh yeah, I know how to read lips.
Right.
And they don't know how to read lips very well, so they're
Mhm.
just like,
So for me,
yeah, yeah,
I
this guy is gonna murder everybody.
so for me, it's not necessarily that I can read lips, but I'm so good at body language that if I see your lips moving in certain ways and I watch how you're reacting with your body, I can sort of put pieces together at the very least to try to find out what you mean by what you're trying to mouth out. It doesn't work all the time because there's a lot of people who don't move when they're moving their lips. So I'm seeing you're like, you just like whisper it. Or is the person in a different room so you could just tell it to me? But no, like I said, I so because of the situation I grew up with, I grew up in a or I learned more on how people communicate using body language.
Hmm.
And so and again, it's just helps me understand people. But
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way too, where like I I look more because of the because how I've grown up, and you know this.
mhm,
I I've always had a problem with like speech. So um I read more to this day. I still read more body language and facial expressions more than actual speech, you
mhm,
know. And like even if you can figure out exactly what's going on inside of their head, like uh, uh, it's like someone is dealing with a problem and it's seriously stressing them out. You might
yeah,
not know exactly what's up with them because they won't tell you directly at first, but you could tell just by their body language that like and facial expressions that like something isn't quite right. And like and I don't know if it's just a me thing, but sometimes I even get this aura that this aura of like, oh, something is not right with them.
mhm.
You're kind
No,
they're kind of being like unusual. I get that feeling sometimes.
I
You know.
so because I'm a scheduling manager, I also get to talk to the people who, or I get to be one of the first people to talk about or talk to, and see the people who we're hiring, so I can find out, what times or what days and times work best for them. And the weird part is there are certain people, and I'm not going to be able to tell any of this because I'm still working, but there are certain people who I have a really bad feeling about or I had a really bad feeling about when they came in to work. And, I'm not saying you know, that my intuition is the best. I, especially considering I try to think about, the best from people rather than, oh, this person's not going to work out. But for the past couple of people who have left due to certain situations, that intuition did happen to be right. I mean, granted,
Yeah.
we've had several that happen within the past month or so.
Oh yeah. And I've experienced some of that
Hmm.
when I worked at Subway. Well, even now I still get those feelings, even when I'm not like working a particular job. It's kind of the same thing when you're a gigging musician and you're trying to figure out, well, who do I want to play with on my gigs? Who do I have like a good feeling about? And I'm not gonna lie, sometimes it's a tough choice, and sometimes it's even hard to tell because um it's not just a simple factor of, oh, can they play the music? And of course, like if they can't play the music, then they shouldn't be on the gig. But it has more to do with like, can they show up to the gig? Can I
Right,
trust them to show up
right.
on time for a gig and not trying to like, you know, get me or the person that hired us for the gig mad or
Hmm.
anything. And I've had to deal with that a couple of times where like like even the past year where it was just like, I've worked with musicians who are just like have impeccable talent, you know, really great facility on their instrument, like, on like a professional level.
Hmm.
And they're not the most sometimes they're not the most reliable people out there. And like
No.
and like, I'll text them sometimes like, hey, where you at, bro? And they won't answer.
Hmm.
They won't answer. And like for anything,
Right.
if
And
you're not gonna
it's
show up, if you're not gonna show up, tell me ahead of time.
yes,
And
exactly.
now of course, there are certain situations,
Yes,
you
there's
got if you got yourself into a car accident, I can understand that. Well,
right.
I have to be understanding
Hmm.
about that, and like I hope that you're doing all right, and that your body and your mind are doing okay and whatnot.
Right. But if
But
it's something like, they had overslept or something like that, I would assume if you have something planned for the day, you would at the very least try to wake up or at a reasonable time to get ready and to make it there.
yeah, and even in our last job at like Public Works and whatnot, we've experienced some of that, or at least I've experienced
Mhm.
a lot of that.
I don't think there was that much of that this past summer that we
Yeah,
worked, but the one before that we had one particular coworker. I don't know what the situation with that is, but he only worked maybe 2 shifts per week, if that.
I sometimes it was two, sometimes it was one per week. Um, Sometimes he wouldn't even show up for the entire week. I think there was a point where he didn't show up for like a week or 2 weeks even.
Right.
It's hard to tell, you
Hmm.
know. Um, yeah,
Yeah. So,
and here's the thing with that particular type of job, it's like, why couldn't you have just fired the guy? And but the thing is that like, you know,
I mean, for certain jobs, you have to have a plausible reason to fire a guy. And sure, for him, there was, but I don't think it was fully that. I don't know. I don't know the full situation with that. And
yeah, well, it was last year. It got fixed.
yes, it did get
This
fixed.
year. Yeah, because
Yep, because
we did have a coworker for a while that only showed up to like 8 shifts over the
I
course.
don't even think he showed up for 8. I think it was only like 4 or 5.
Yeah. Point is, barely showed up to work,
Hmm.
got fired the next day.
Yeah. And then the guy from 2 summers ago, he wasn't hired back this past summer.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it was the fact that he was hired back. I think it was he just didn't apply, you know. Because
Right.
they take in the applications, you apply for the job, you know, in terms of the work environment that we were in, it's like you sign in the application, you do your sample test, the drug test,
Hmm.
and then they're like, okay, you're working the job, and like I don't know about you, but like I don't think any of us had a job interview because at least with Subway, I had a job interview. But
So I somewhat had a job interview. I walked in and I spoke with the head of the department, and he's like, "Yeah, so this is more just to like show you around, so I could get to know you a little more. You pretty much already have the job. I just want to get to know you a little more." So, I mean, technically it was an interview because he was knowing me a little more, but at the same time, he prefaced it by saying, "Oh yeah, you're fine. You whatever you
well,
say
I
here, it's not going to affect what's going on. You've got the job."
if I was interviewing you, I would say there's no need for an interview. You're hired.
Well, that's because you've known me for 10 years.
Yeah, that's true. But I would think some people would would take a good look at you and you're like, yeah, this is a good guy. We should hire this guy,
Hmm.
you know.
And I mean, I would hope so, but at the same time, I'm fine with doing whatever interviews just to make people feel better. I will
Yeah.
say, Jake, if I were hiring you, I would totally have an interview, make it
Mhm.
as professional as possible, and not let you know that you've already got the job until after I've already put you on edge thinking this interview's not going well. Maybe I should have brushed my teeth a little more. Maybe I should have combed my hair the other way. Only for you, though. Only for you. Anyone else, I would keep it as professional as possible. But because I've known you, I would totally mess with you at least for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So to continue with the original topic, because we did kind of get sidetracked, which is also kind of the point to the podcast. We'll start
That's
a
the po-
conversation. We don't know where it's going.
that's the point of all of our discussions.
Yes, that is the point to all of our discussions. But to go back on what we were talking about, the whole uh, verbal versus mental thinking, when you're verbal thinking, does it make sense to talk back?
What do you mean by that? Like,
So, like I mentioned earlier, there are people, myself included, who will talk their way through a problem.
mhm,
Well, what if you talk, like, say the solution right back to you after you come up with it? So, like, uh, where, where does this missing screw belong? Oh, the missing screw belongs right there. You know,
mhm,
so just because, there are people who will talk their way through,
mhm.
but does it make sense to talk back to yourself when you're asking yourself the question?
Again, I think it's kind of at least for me, it's kind of a normal thing, you know.
Okay.
Like, I don't find that to be unnatural whatsoever. It's kind of like it's kind of like the movies or the TV shows that you watch, those scenes where they're just like thinking the protagonist is like thinking their way through a problem and you see
Oh,
like all these
yes.
complicated formulas in their
Oh,
head
yes.
and then
Like,
they say out loud, I got it.
yeah, like the Sean Murphys. Yeah, the Sean Murphys, you know, or oh, there was someone else who would like look at thing or look through the problem with images, which that was another thing that we can bring up with this. So we were talking about the visual or the verbal thinkers and the mental thinkers, but what about the visual thinkers? The people who will look at a problem and while looking at the problem could like visually think about these like images on how to put things together. Would that be put in the same boat as the verbal thinkers, or not the verbal thinkers, the mental thinkers who just think things through in their heads, or would that be something completely different?
I I still think that's still a mental thing because like you, you're creating something in your mind that hasn't been, and I'm just using a metaphor a little bit, it
Hmm.
hasn't been put on paper yet. There's no like physical drawing or formula or whatever, you know, you just have it on in your head. And some of the best artists or architects out there have that
Mm,
ability to do that, to like visualize that stuff in their head. You know,
right,
so some of the stuff that I looked up when it comes to musicians is like, they can visualize certain things in their head, or they can hear certain things in their head, you
hmm,
know, which I still categorize that as like, being a mental thing, because you can hear it or you could see it in your mind, but you haven't been able to put anything, you haven't put the physical touch into it yet.
right.
It won't become reality until you make the first move, so to say.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I would completely agree with that. I don't know, that was just more of like a side, just trying to throw a little more out there because I haven't seen anything about time yet for this or the timing for this section yet. So I'm trying to see if we should draw it out or if we should try ending it right about now. Do you think there's anything else we could talk about pertaining to this subject?
Um, Maybe just to like close it off a little bit. It's just interesting because like, we categorize people under like, the certain types of people that they are. And,
Mm-hmm.
since we're talking about thinkers,
Yeah.
just getting that example, we categorize people based on the way that they think.
Oh, there's
But
so many categories that people
yeah,
are being placed under, not just
yeah,
for thinking.
but I think each person is in their own category, even if like, because like, you know, if you were to take like two architects, you
Mm-hmm.
know, they might visualize things, you
All
know,
right.
generally speaking, the same way. But the
Mm-hmm.
way that they visualize it and what they visualize is different. You know, it's like if you were to put Leonardo and Michelangelo, some of the
Some
most
of the
famous
best Ninja Turtles out there.
artists.
I'm
I was thinking you were gonna say something about that.
a nerd. I have to say something like that.
Yeah, yeah, but they were some of our greatest architects out there.
Mm-hmm.
Like people are like, oh yeah, they painted and they sculpted and whatnot. They were still different.
Yeah,
In
they were.
fact, they even had their preferences because what's funny was like people are like, oh, Michelangelo's paintings are amazing or Leonardo's sculptures are amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Leonardo preferred to paint more than
Right.
sculpted. And same with Michelangelo. He was more into sculpting than painting.
Right.
Because I remember studying about Michelangelo and like how he was tasked to like paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel.
Mm-hmm.
Probably one of the best paintings that he's ever done. And like
Right.
it's not even on a museum, it's on a freaking church ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, I
Um,
will say it seems like one of the hardest things to do because you're gonna have to like lay down just to paint everything.
yeah, yeah. Um, but but the thing is that like I remember um when learning about this, it's like he didn't particularly enjoy it.
Well, again, you're laying
And
down painting a ceiling. I wouldn't think
yeah,
anyone would
yeah,
enjoy
but
that.
yeah, but it goes back to like he didn't particularly enjoy painting. Again, he was
Hmm.
more of a sculptor.
Right.
And like the last work, the thing that he worked on right before he passed away was a sculpture, and it was
Oh.
it was unfinished. Like he was in the process of doing it. It's kind of finished. Like you can make out what he was making in the process. You got the outline, but it was like wasn't really polished up yet. Still
Mm.
displayed in a museum though.
Seems like
But
something that a modern artist will do, but purposefully instead of accidentally. Like, I was working on this sculpture, but
yeah,
I think I'll just leave it as it is.
yeah, yeah, and
We'll say it resembles the whole, this current generation's lack of wanting to finish things, but in all actuality, I just got tired of it.
yeah. Um, yeah, and then Leonardo, besides being a painter and sculptor, he was also like he was an inventor. You
Hmm.
know, you take a look at like some of the stuff that he was trying to invent, and I think
I mean, he was
recently
trying to
that
invent one of the first flying machines.
yeah, yeah, and like I think there was a movie on that on like the creativity of Leonardo. It was like an animated movie
And
or stop motion movie. I think I know there were trailers on that because I would see them on YouTube. Um, I'll probably look it up.
Yeah,
Um,
I'll have to look that up too, because that sounds
yeah,
like
but
something I would watch.
I wanted to watch it too. I just had no way of watching it, but it was beautiful. I think it might have been done by Gil Garturo, because that seemed like the type of stuff that he would do. Maybe. I'm
Anim
not.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
it could have been stop motion. I think it was stop motion because
I
like he
mean,
also
stop motion does seem more up Guillermo del Toro's alley rather than
yeah yeah
animation.
yeah. Well, I think it was stop motion, and he also did like the Pinocchio movie a couple years back, which I saw some of it. Amazing movie. I still want to finish that one.
No, is was that the year that we had like 4 or 5 different Pinocchio movies releasing?
I think it was like three that were the most talked about.
Hmm.
It was Del Toro's Pinocchio. There
Hmm.
was the remake of Disney's Pinocchio, which
Oh yes, the one
that
with
one was
Tom Hanks.
yeah, that one was awful.
I haven't seen any of them, so
Yeah,
I've seen the
well,
original Pinocchio
I've seen the
and
original Pinocchio. Yeah,
I've seen the Shrek movies with Pinocchio in it. I don't think
best
I've seen.
Pinocchio by far.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
I'm gonna wear ladies' underwear. Are you? I'm sorry, God. Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
and but then there was that other Pinocchio movie, which honestly I think was better than Disney's remake attempt on Pinocchio, except it was still kind of terrible. It was like
oh, was that the one with like the acting? It was like it was animated and the voice acting was so monotone. It was like,
yeah,
I want to
like
be a
the
real
voice
boy.
yeah, the voice actor like he sounded so monotone, and it was like so nasally too. It's like
Oh,
let's go Tibble, skitty 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 skitty.
ugh, oh, that sounds horrible.
I saw all the reviews that came up on that movie. It was just like everyone was just like so just dogging on that
Yes.
movie. And I remember the one scene in particular where like Pinocchio was like trying to like uh get this one girl to fall in love with him. And like this girl just so happened to say like what was it? She goes up there and it's just like Pinocchio, I don't even like you anymore. It is just like she barely knew him, and like she goes all dramatic on it.
Yeah,
It,
now you're convincing me to watch bad movies. How dare you?
we should watch bad movies sometime.
We
I think it would
should.
be fun because I never attempted to watch. Uh, like I've seen reviews of bad movies. You
You know
know,
what? If this podcast does not work out, we'll try again watching bad movies.
yeah, we'll
There's
watch
going to be a
all
lot
the
more copyright issues with that because we're going to be showing clips, or at the very least, audio is going to be playing. But at the same time, I'm sure between the two of us, we can make something funny out of it.
yeah. I think we could, you know, I think some of the bad movies like we should watch, or at least some of the ones that I do know about. Some of them are animated, for the record. It's like
Right.
Joshua and the Promised Land, you
Okay.
know, which is basically you know the story from the Bible, but with
Right.
furries.
Hmm. Wait, with
Like
what?
with furries.
Oh.
Like they're anthropomorphic animals. You know, there's lions
Okay.
and tigers and bears and
Well,
whatnot.
so it's
Except they're animated weirdly. They look like
uh
I'm not lying to you when I say they look like puppets.
okay.
It's like some of their sockets are broken.
All right. Well,
um and then there's like some of those rip-off movies, mostly of
hmm.
Pixar movies. You know, the car
Yeah.
rip-off, the Up rip-off.
Yeah.
Um
I'm just gonna point out the Finding Nemo ripoff. I think it's called The Deep. You know, that one was it wasn't half bad.
yeah.
I don't know why I watched it, but it wasn't half bad.
Yeah.
All right, so I will say we do have just over a minute left
Hmm.
in this, so I would say we should just wrap it up. If
Yeah.
that, yep, and we can continue this next week because we are
Hmm.
trying to make this a weekly thing. But thank you to everyone who's listening through Spotify or watching through YouTube. Again, a this is a just a project between two friends, just having fun, starting conversations. So we'll see how far this goes. Maybe this will continue on well into our 40s, or this might end within a couple weeks. Let's hope it's more closer to the 40s.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, and with that, that is myself, Mr. Xavier Dean.
And I'm Jacob Grain.
Yep, and we are signing off for the next podcast. Have a wonderful day.